Hey YouTube, this is Marcus again with another video. I'm actually just sitting on the bus out here in Ashland, Kentucky. I drove a field trip today and there's nobody around and won't be for a couple hours, so I thought it was a good opportunity to chat with you guys about something. I watched a video the other day by Review Tech USA, and Rich was talking about the future of gaming and these game streaming services, how PlayStation Now is about to add PlayStation 4 games, and I think Xbox's Game Pass, is not quite game streaming, but he made a comment that I was wanting to talk about where he said basically the future of gaming is going to be game streaming, and that eventually nobody's going to have powerful hardware in their home. They're just going to have kind of dummy terminals, like the little Steam boxes and things that stream content to your over your internet connection. And I don't necessarily think that's going to come to fruition within my lifetime, and I'll tell you why. The quality of internet connections around the world has increased exponentially. When I was growing up, when we got internet, it was 28K dial-up, and I think before that, either because the connection wasn't capable of it or because our computer's modem was crap, we had like 11 or 12K, something like that. And now I've recently moved back to the old home place and got my own house and my own family there, and we've got 50 megs down and 25 megs up. We have a fiber optic cable ran straight to the house, and we're out in the boonies, out in the woods. You can go watch the videos about moving our new house up the holler. I've got several videos on it and see where the house is located. But even with those speeds, even though they are sufficient to transfer that amount of data, the big downfall of this game streaming thing is going to be latency. Now, when you are playing games online, like say Battlefield or Call of Duty, you can have a latency of 25 milliseconds or so, and it's not a huge deal because your hardware is actually drawing and rendering the graphics. And so when you press the crouch button on your controller, your character crouches instantaneously. The only latency is the latency between your controller and your console and then onto your television screen, because your hardware is actually performing that function. With this game streaming, everything, you're basically putting miles and miles of distance between your controller and the console or PC that is actually running the game. So if you have 20 milliseconds of latency, there's going to be 20 milliseconds of latency between you pressing the crouch button on your controller or keyboard and your character on screen actually crouching. And when you're playing, like right now, when you play, like I said, let's say an online first-person shooter like Battlefield or Call of Duty, the 20 milliseconds of latency is not nearly as noticeable, or it doesn't have as much of an impact on gameplay as it would if, like I said, if your computer was not actually drawing and rendering the graphics. And there's not a whole lot you can do to fix latency, because it really has a lot to do with, especially nowadays with the speeds that we're getting. Yes, we can transfer lots and lots of data really fast, but there's always going to be some latency because, those signals, that data can only travel at a certain speed. And so, you can have 50 megabits download speed, but those signals, that 50 megabits per second, that diameter of pipe, I guess you could call it, is still only going to travel right about or just under the speed of light, and there's nothing you can do to increase that. And so the only way to get around the issue with latency is to spend an inordinate amount of money on servers and hardware that are close to your customers. And especially when it comes to people like me that are out in the boonies, there is no big city within 50 or 100 miles of here. The closest city that would, I think, might even get attention for something like that would probably be Pikeville, and that's 45 or 50 miles away from my house. And so you're always going to have that little bit of latency. And I did a recent video where I tried out a couple of games on a PlayStation Now on my PC because there was like a 7-day free trial or something. And I don't know where the server was located. They recommended like 5 megs download speed and like 1 or 2 upload, and I more than exceeded that. But there was definitely noticeable latency. It wasn't as noticeable in a game like God of War, but it was noticeable. I could tell it was there. And when I tried playing Killzone 3, it got really noticeable in Killzone 3 because it's a first-person shooter. So when I would move my right joystick to say look around, there was a very noticeable fraction of a second delay between me pushing that right joystick in a direction and the on-screen camera actually catching up and doing what I wanted it to do.
At least on this game, you can see. Watch this. When I press the right joystick. Now that one was pretty noticeable. Leave no one alive. Oh, wrong button. My bad. All right. Oh, snap, son. They got guns. That was hard because of that delay, just killing a turret. Where are we at? Yeah, so...
And so when you compound that latency with the network latency between you and other players, like let's say you wanted to stream Battlefield 1 and play online against other players, when you compound that serious input latency with the network latency between you and the other players, I don't see game streaming taking off as the primary means of video game delivery anytime soon, purely because you can't break the speed of light, at least that we know of yet. And that's about that's the speed that electricity travels at, or just under the speed of light. Now you can widen the pipe and you can say, well, if you get 100 megabits or 200 megabits or a gigabit per second internet to your house, yes, you can move a lot of data very fast, but you've still got latency between the endpoints, because no matter how fat you make that pipe and how much data you can push through it at one time, it can still only move at or just under the speed of light. And the only way to help remedy that is to put servers close to people. And that's where things are going to get complicated, because that's going to take an insane amount of money to accommodate everybody who's going to want to do this. But in order for this to be the future of gaming, they're going to have to spend ungodly amounts of money on this hardware, and on a constant basis, because as games get more complicated, as hardware gets more advanced, those servers are going to have to be regularly updated so that they can keep up with the requirements of these new games and stream that content to the millions of people who are going to be playing those games at any given moment. So I don't see the need for powerful hardware in the home going away anytime soon. Dummy terminals, I think, will become more popular, especially for people like me who have a powerful gaming PC, like Steam and home streaming in the home. Now that is a situation where these dummy terminals and game streaming might be useful, because when you're going from my gaming PC, when you're going from my gaming PC in the living room or in the bedroom to, say, the laptop in the living room, your latency is going to be less than 1 millisecond. The network latency is going to be less than the latency of the television that we're streaming the game to. And that is a situation where a dummy terminal or game streaming would be useful. But as far as this sort of widespread game streaming to everyone who wants to play video games in the future, I don't really think that's going to take off, purely because you can't send data faster than the speed of light. So, I'm kind of glad that it's that way, because I'm the kind of person who likes to have control over my stuff. I run a home server and we back up our files there. I make backup copies of all of my DVDs and Blu-rays, all of my physical copies of my games. They all get copied to that home server because I'm the kind of person that I like to have physical control over my stuff. If I pay $60 for a video game, I'm going to make a copy of that game to my home server because I want to have physical control over that game, so that in the future, if that hardware that runs it breaks, I can play it in an emulator because I have a physical copy of the game that I paid for. And I'm not a fan of the idea of essentially renting a game off of somebody. Even with this era of digital distribution, one of the reasons I'm sort of a fan of Steam is because, if I understand correctly, one of the clauses in their license agreement essentially says that if they go out of business, you still get. They're basically legally requiring themselves to give you a copy of all of your games and the license keys and things if they go out of business. And they have a little built-in thing where you can make backup copies of the files on your hard drive to some other storage medium. And so you still got, even though it's not on an optical disc or something, you still have a physical copy of your game and the files that make it up. And if we move to this streaming thing where everything is streamed, you're going to be giving money to these companies and be allowed to play the games, but they can pull the plug on you at any moment, and what are you going to do? Sorry about your luck, Skippy. And I'm just not a fan of that. I like having control of my own stuff, even if it does mean a little bit more overhead on my part with having to build or buy hardware. It means that I, as a customer, can pay money for the product and then keep that product for as long as I want to. So, I see I see game streaming increasing. I do see the market share for it increasing in the future, but I don't see it taking over as the primary means of enjoying video games anytime soon. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to address that comment by Rich at Review Tech USA. I'll put a link in the description to his channel at least, and that video if I can track it back down, because it's been a couple of days since I saw it. But I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about that. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, or suggestions, or input, tell me what you think about this issue. Please put it in the description below. And as always, this is Marcus out. Y'all have a good